The views expressed are solely those of the speaker and not necessarily those of Paltalk.com, AVM software, or its advertisers.
News Talk is online. News Talk Online is a production of Paltalk.com, the largest multimedia interactive program on the internet with more than 4 million unique users on demand on iTunes and on YouTube. And thanks to our good friends at CRN Digital Talk Radio, we are coast to coast across the United States in 12 million households. I'm your host, Gary Baumgarten. Boaz, I can't remember the last time we had so many good-looking men and good-looking women on cam here in the News Talk room on Paltalk. Those who are sitting at home listening on cable are missing all of this action.
Well, I don't know about the good-looking men, Gary, but I'm having a look at the good-looking women. That's okay with you.
Yeah, Tanya says, wait, let me get my cam up. So she wants to be part of the action too. You know, let me just tell you how much I appreciate Paltalk. You know, I could come on to Paltalk and I can flirt with the ladies on here. But did you know that I was going to go to Saudi Arabia. You know, we were going to do the show from Saudi Arabia. But
I was not notified of anything of that sort.
Yes, but I can't do it. And the reason I can't do it is because 57 men have been arrested in Saudi Arabia for flirting with women in public. There's no way. You know, it would be like, don't tase me, bro. Don't tase me, bro, because they'd be all over me.
You'd be arrested on the spot there, especially you.
At the airport. Hell, when I went to Israel and I saw all those beautiful Israeli women, those dark, beautiful Sabras walking around the airport, my jaw dropped. You know, I would have been arrested in Saudi Arabia on the spot. Well, that's the difference between freedom and lack of freedom, I guess. And speaking of the difference between freedom of lack and lack of freedom, what's going on in Cuba? You know, last week, Boaz, when Fidel announced that he was stepping down, I brought on 2 experts on Cuba. And both of the experts on Cuba said that Raul Castro, Fidel's younger brother and then the presumptive heir to the throne in Cuba, would be a reform candidate. And I suggested to the second guest, well, wait a minute. As I recall, Raul is a pretty repressive guy. In fact, he was the henchman for his brother Fidel. Oh, no, said this señorita, who lives, an American, in Cuba for the past 20 years. No! Raul, he's the defense minister. He's never done anything like that. And I said, well, maybe I'm just pulling it out of my ear. Maybe I don't remember correctly what I had studied before about what was going on in Cuba, contemporary Cuba. So I picked up the phone and I called my good friend and great Cuban expert, Maria Werlau, from the Cuba Archive. She's the executive director. It's called the Cuba Archive, ladies and gentlemen, because they archive the facts about what's happening in Cuba. And I said, Maria, am I getting Newsheimers? I said, maybe I'm forgetting that Raul was a good guy. And she says, oh, no, Gary. Raul is a bastard. I'm paraphrasing. But basically, that's what she said. And then she sent me over all this information about the crimes against humanity on countless thousands in Cuba and outside of Cuba. That his first death attributed to him was in 1956 while in exile in Mexico. That he ordered 72 men executed without trial in the city of Santiago. That in 1959, groups of men were lined up in front of ditches at San Juan Hill and shot by firing squad. And Raul delivered the coup de grace to some of them and then ordered a bulldozer to cover them up into a mass grave. that one of the victims was a policeman, an American citizen from Puerto Rico. A policeman, an American policeman from Puerto Rico. That over a decade, about a decade later, those bodies were exhumed. They were encased in concrete and they were dumped into the ocean. On and on and on and on. And how could a person who's been living in Cuba for 20 years, who was working for Radio Cuba, who sets herself up as an expert on Cuban affairs, not be aware of this? Maybe it's because the press is controlling Cuba. Well, Maria Werlau is president of the board and Cuba Archive's executive director. She is a consultant in private practice. She's a policy analyst, an author of wide-ranging writings on Cuban affairs. She's a longtime human rights advocate, and I am proud to say that she is a professional colleague and has grown to be a friend. Maria Werlau, welcome to News Talk Online on Paltalk.com.
Thank you very much, and what an interesting backgrounder you gave the listeners.
Am I accurate?
Very much. I'm wondering who your Cuba expert is.
You're my Cuba expert. I attribute this on my blog to the Cuba Archive. You didn't get a chance to read the blog, but you have a very nice write-up there.
Oh, really?
By the way,
Okay.
for those of you who are unaware, it's GaryBaumgarten.com. Easy to remember.
No, I mean the expert who worked for Radio Cuba.
Oh,
who
yeah. Last week's expert
was a very nice guy.
Yeah, I couldn't believe it. I'm like,
Yeah,
I was scratching my head.
I mean, look, to begin with, anyone who works for Radio Cuba works for the Cuban government. The
Right.
media in Cuba is state media. There is no independent media. So just right there, you have a conflict of interest. That person would have never been hired if they were not vetted for ideological and political reasons. So either this person is grossly uninformed by choice, because there's plenty out there on the things that I pointed out in my release, or, they're just lying because they have an agenda. I just don't see it. I just don't see how a person who is a journalist could ignore this kind of thing. It's part of history. Actually,
well,
the revolution executed on the beginning and put it on the news because they wanted to create fear. So not even them could take it back. All of those people that they killed in the beginning, at least. Later, they killed more systematically and in lesser numbers.
Yeah, everything that we talk about here is documented, right?
Everything that we have in our website as documented cases, we provide the sources for the information. In many of those cases, in all of the cases that I mentioned in the release, I know personally the families. So when we give an example of a case, we have the documentation and the contact information of survivors and, relatives. One thing I didn't get to add in that piece was because, lack of space and just plain oversight on my part. We also have a number of people documented to have been killed, young men who were doing their compulsory military service in Cuba, who for one reason or the other opposed the regime or dissented, or in some cases they just wanted to go home. They tried to desert, and they were actually killed on the spot or executed later. And we have several of those cases also